Hey guys, so while it seems like it's been a while since I uploaded my review of Doom Patrol Season 1, I actually do have a decent reason as to why. And if you guessed by the title of the video, it was because I was busy playing one of the most universally beloved video games of all time, The Last of Us. And in case you're wondering, and I also want to mention real quick that, I actually did have other games, another game that I did want to review, Jedi Fallen Order, and the reason why I didn't review it was because I just simply forgot. But in sum up, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. Love how they were able to take advantage of the player's connection to the Force. Really love the lightsaber mechanics that you could use and how to fight other enemies. Really enjoyed how they explored elements of the old canon and the new canon. In this game. Really enjoyed all the new characters and locations that they introduced. Only problem that I had with it was that it very much felt like it was taking elements from other games, like the combat of Dark Souls, the puzzle solving of Tomb Raider, the platforming of Uncharted, and just sort of combining them together and not really doing all that much different from them. And also, it is a bit buggy. There were a few instances where the game did glitch out, but overall, I did really enjoy it. This is probably a really good return to form when it comes to Star Wars games. 9 out of 10. But now the fact that I got that out of the way, let's talk about The Last of Us. Oh, and in case you're wondering why exactly I keep darting over to my right, that is because this is actually the first video in which I actually am using a script. I actually have my computer set up, and I'm currently reading off my script, except for this little bit right now. And that's because I feel like the fact that with The Last of Us, I have to, go over the script, because I feel like if I just did it how I usually do with my other videos, it would go on for way longer than it should, so I'm sticking with the script. But now for some context. So, hold on, I'm actually just going to bring the computer here so I can read off it, so it'd be a lot better. Now for context. Because I actually heard of The Last of Us beforehand, but I never got a chance to play it when it came out at launch. Why? Well, that's because when the game first came out back in 2013 for the PlayStation 3, I was only 8 years old. And I highly doubt the fact that my parents would have let me play a M-rated game when I was only 8 years old. So I never got a chance to play it when it ended up coming out. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I have to adjust my computer, something went wrong. But anyways, so yeah, I never got a chance to play it, but I'd always heard people talking about The Last of Us and how it was one of the greatest video games ever made. And with the hype surrounding The Last of Us Part 2 and the eventual release of it, I'm releasing this after the game came out, obviously, and the announcement that an HBO television adaptation is actually in the works, I figured, hey, now's probably the best time ever to play The Last of Us. And I should also mention real quick the fact that the version that I played, obviously, was the remastered version on the PlayStation 4. So in addition to playing the regular game, I did play the Left Behind DLC, as featured right here, which further explores Ellie's character and a section of the game that wasn't featured, which I'll get to in a moment. But yeah. So, is it true when people say it is one of the greatest video games of all time and doesn't really live up to its hype? Yeah, it does. Look, I'm sorry, I know it's a bit anticlimactic, but I'm sorry, but I just love this game, you guys. You have no idea how much I love it. And to the people over at Naughty Dog, you guys give yourselves a pat on the back because you guys made an amazing video game. But now the fact that I got that out of the way, I should probably focus on, tell you to like 2 or 3 people who don't know what The Last of Us is, I should probably explain the story. So, the plot of the game takes place 20 years after a deadly virus broke out and essentially turned people into zombies. Here they are called the Infected. And there are multiple stages of the Infected. There's how they initially start out more like zombies, then eventually they turn into something called clickers, where they lose their sight but have enhanced hearing and use echolocation. Bloaters, which have been infected for long periods of time and they pretty much are covered in the stuff that mutates them and can throw out spores, and then eventually they just become spores themselves. The body decays and they just become the fungus. Now, in the game, this is where we meet one of our main protagonists, Joel. Joel is a grizzled, older man who had to experience a heartbreaking loss when the virus first broke out. Now, he just works as a smuggler to get just trying to get by. And then, through a series of events, he discovers his next job is to smuggle our other protagonist, a 14-year-old girl named Ellie. Now, why exactly is Ellie so important? Well, it just so happens that Ellie was actually bitten by an infected, but hasn't actually turned into an infected yet. Meaning, there still could be hope for a cure that could bring an end to the infection. So, Joel's job is to bring Ellie to a group of individuals called the Fireflies, across an infected America in hopes that a cure can be created. All the while, they're being chased down by government officials, also other factions of different rundown cities, a group of cannibals at one point, which I'll delve further to in a bit, and of course, the infected themselves. I should also mention that the events of the game take place over the course of about a year. It starts out in summer, then goes into fall, then in the winter, and then eventually into spring. So it covers all 4 seasons. But anyways, so this is a story that we've seen many times before. We've seen the story about an old, grizzled, jaded man and how he goes on an adventure with his daughter figure and how he eventually learns how to care and open up to her after he lost somebody that he cared about truly deeply, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, we've seen dozens of other zombie movies that it feels like they're almost running out of ideas. Heck, I also want to mention Logan actually had a lot of similarities to The Last of Us, and that came out 3 or 4 years after the game. So, it's not like some of the ideas in it aren't original, but the way they execute the idea is what makes it so interesting. Instead of having the focus be on the infection and how it affects humanity as a whole, the game chooses to focus on the relationship between Joel and Ellie. And this is what I consider to be the best part of the game. And that is the relationship Joel and Ellie have. Don't get me wrong, the gameplay mechanics are really good, and it's actually one of the very few video games that can also make my heart race, make me have a foot cramp, and sweat all at once. But don't worry, I'll talk about the gameplay in a bit. But what I love about the game is that at its heart, it is the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Both Troy Baker's Joel and Ashley Johnson as Ellie are some of the best performances I've ever seen in a video game. And I think the scene that best exemplifies this is the scene at the barn where Ellie ends up bringing up Joel's daughter and how even though she does feel sorry, she has experienced loss too. In case you're wondering who Sarah is, Sarah was, of course, the individual that Joel ended up losing. And then Joel ends up rebuttaling with, "You have no idea what loss is." And then Ellie says, one of the best lines in the game is, "Everyone I have ever loved has either died or left me. Everyone except for you. So don't tell me that I'd be better off with somebody else because the truth is I would just be more scared." And then after a minute, Joel says, "You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad." That right there is one of the most powerful scenes I've ever seen in anything. And not only that, but the actual opening of the game is insane as how we actually get to know Joel and his daughter and how we actually grow to like them. Then when this whole zombie epidemic eventually breaks out and Joel's daughter ends up getting killed, that's heartbreaking. But that just shows you the power that these characters have over you. You grow to care about them. And it's legitimately sad when you get to see them die. Tess, who has been around with Joel for a while, ends up getting bit. Hold on 1 minute. I need to actually look up what some of the names of some of the other characters are. Just give me 1 second. Here we go. Marlene, the leader of the Fireflies, I'll get to her fate in a bit. Both Henry and Sam both end up getting killed. Sam ends up getting bitten, and Henry ends up committing suicide. And then, of course, during the winter chapter of the game, Ellie ends up coming across a guy named David. And David actually turned out to belong to a group of crazy cannibals who wanted to rape and eat Ellie. So, yeah, that's why I mentioned the cannibal part in the earlier section of the video. But there are still a few other characters mentioned throughout that do end up surviving. Like, for example, Bill actually is one of the characters that they actually get a car from, and he ends up making it out okay, which is pretty cool. And, of course, you know, Joel ends up reuniting with his brother Tommy and his wife Marla. No, not Marla, Maria, I'm sorry. and they both turn out to be, and they both make it out okay. There are characters that do make it out okay, but there are a few that don't. So there's that. But now I want to also talk about the graphics. I find it crazy the fact that how we're at that point with VFX that we can almost create photorealistic people and photorealistic environments. Like, don't get me wrong, the cutscenes are absolutely beautifully animated, like how you can see almost every detail in the character's face. But also, the environments are absolutely amazing. I love how they're able to sort of meticulously plan out, you know, like, okay, so what would happen if human society would sort of crumble apart? Nature would sort of take over, it would sort of grow over buildings, buildings would start to collapse in on themselves, overabundance of greens everywhere. There's that. And then, of course, there's the scene with the giraffes. It should also mention real quick the fact that the score composed by, I might butcher this, Gustavo Santaolalla. The score is amazing, and when it really kicks in that moment, you just sort of take in the whole beauty of it all, and you're almost left in tears, like I was. So that's amazing. But now we should actually talk about the gameplay itself. Now, what makes the gameplay interesting is that it actually has a reliance on stealth. Sure, you could go guns blazing, but don't be surprised when you're killed by a pack of clickers or by another rival group. Yes, there are moments where it's okay, where you can actually go and shoot the zombies and other characters, but for the most part, stealth is your ally, so you want to be able to, as best as you can, stealthily take out your enemies. And if it is necessary, you can break that stealth. But I do find it really cool the fact that they do have that option. Plus, you also have a variety of weapons, not just guns, because you do have a few guns. You have a pistol, a hunting rifle, a shotgun, a shorty, and a couple of other weapons. Eventually, later throughout the game, you get elements like a hunting bow, you get a flamethrower, you also can be able to make smoke grenades, smoke bombs, Molotov cocktails, nail bombs. You can also be able to make health packs for yourselves when you're running low, which definitely does help. So yeah, that's really cool. Now, I also want to mention that while for most of the game you do play as Joel, during the winter section and throughout all of Left Behind, you do get to play as Ellie, which I do think is really cool, the fact that you actually get to play as both of the protagonists, which I think is really cool. And I also want to briefly mention that I really did enjoy Left Behind in the fact that you did get to see more of Ellie's past. Not just her relationship with a girl that she mentioned at the end of the game named Riley, who was actually introduced in the Last of Us American Dreams comics, which, yes, I did read, because I love this franchise. But also you get to see sort of a period of time that you never got to see, because during the fall section of the game, did I mention the fact that there are spoilers throughout this review? Whatever. So during the fall section, Joel gets gravely injured. And when the winter section picks up, you see Ellie out hunting. This is where she meets David, and then eventually all that ends up happening, and Joel's able to recover. But Left Behind actually shows how Ellie got to the point of how she found the house, how she actually got Joel stitched up to begin with, and it also shows a group of people that she ends up coming across. Not just clickers, but also David's little group. And one little mechanic that I really did enjoy in Left Behind is that you could actually trigger a sound, and because you can also throw bricks and bottles to be able to alert the clickers, you can also alert them to the other enemies, and they will proceed to kill each other, which I think was really cool. And now I'm going to get into the real knee-deep of it. I'm going to get into the ending of the game. So if you didn't mind me talking about the rest of the game, then tune out now. But I just want to say real quick that for those of you who are tuning out, I really did enjoy the game. If you haven't played it, what are you doing with your life? Go do it. It's incredible. It's definitely worth it. But anyways, now to the ending. So after a very long and painful journey, Joel and Ellie are able to make it to the Firefly camp where they meet with their leader, Marlene. But it is discovered that in order to create a vaccine for the infection, Ellie is going to have to die. But Joel already lost one daughter. He's not losing another. So he ends up going on a rampage and goes around the hospital and kills almost all the Fireflies there. He even ends up killing the doctors who ends up performing the surgery on Ellie. And then he ends up killing the leader of the group, Marlene. And the thing is, too, she doesn't immediately die. She's like, please, let me live. And Joel's like, you just come after her. And then shoots her in the head. Then, eventually, after Ellie wakes up, Joel ends up lying to her and says that there were actually more people like her and that they actually just given up on making a cure. Then, after they make it back to Tommy's sanctuary, Ellie ends up telling Joel about her experience with Riley and how she's had a bit of survivor's guilt. And she also makes Joel promise that everything that he said about the Fireflies was true, to which Joel does. And that's the ending of the game. Now, while I do think Joel is a little justifiable in wanting to keep the closest thing he had to a daughter alive, he essentially just traded the fate of the world for the fate of Ellie. But you also could make the argument the fact that the world is so far gone that there isn't a way to save it, but still. But I also believe the fact that Ellie secretly knew Joel was lying, but still chose to accept it anyways. Like, the way that she looked at him, I kind of got the feeling, the fact that deep down she kind of knew, but still went along with it. And that's one of the many things that I actually loved about the game, because it's not always clear-cut. It is open-ended, and it does leave it open for interpretation. Do you think that what Joel did was right, or do you believe the fact that he was incredibly selfish and doomed the world? Now, I want to move on to elements of the game that I did not like. This section's going to be short because, surprisingly, I actually didn't have any complaints. Like, true, there were a few minor nitpicks, but any minor bugs that I had with it, I could easily write them off. So, in short, I absolutely love The Last of Us. I love the story, I love the characters, I love the gameplay, I love the world that it established. I love how it left me on the edge of my seat out of being either tense or emotionally invested as to what is going on. How it's one of the few video games that can actually make me cry. There are several moments that are like that. So, yeah, I just love it. And I'm going to give it the official Owen Seiler rating of 10 out of 10. Would recommend. It is not only one of the best video games I've ever played, it is one of my all-time favorite video games. So to Bruce Straley, Neil Druckmann, the people at Naughty Dog, Troy Baker, and Ashley Johnson, I salute to you. You made an incredible game. Good on ya. So, yeah. That wraps up my thoughts on The Last of Us. So in case you're wondering when I'm going to be posting my review of Part 2, well, that's going to be a little while. Why? Well, there are a few factors, but I'm going to mention two. The first factor is the price of the game. It's $60, and I know that's the usual price for a recent game to come out, but yeah, I'm still planning on saving up my money, and maybe I'll be able to buy it in the future, but that leads to option 2. If I do buy the game now, I won't have time to play it, because The Last of Us, I purchased it sometime last week, and I just beat it around 2 or 3 days before I started. By the time the video goes up, it would have been 2 or 3 days since I beat the game and left behind. So, yeah, it took me a while to beat the game. Not because I was terrible at it, although there were many instances where I did die. I guess you're wondering, I did play on normal mode, so there's that. But it's because the playthrough of the second game is about 30 hours. And, in case you're wondering why I can't play it in that time, the PlayStation that I use to play these games does not belong to me. It belongs to my brother, my younger brother. And he mainly spends most of his days using it to play NBA 2K20 and Fortnite. So, whenever the off chance I do get to play the game, it usually is for about maybe 2 or 3 hours at the bare minimum. So, yeah, that's why it's probably going to be a while until I do a review of Last of Us Part 2. But I will get a review of it out there. I promise you that. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you click the little like. Make sure you click that like button. Also, subscribe and make sure you get the little notification bell to make sure you get all notifications. And also, editor's note. To those who are going to leave hate comments in my video, don't. Because in regards to Last of Us Part 2, Laura Bailey, the actress who played Abby in Part 2, recently showed on Twitter that she had been receiving death threats because of her role in the game. Don't do that. That's inexcusable behavior. And the fact that I literally have to go out of my way of being positive just to address this is ridiculous. We live in a very fragile world. We only have one shot. We only have one opportunity to seize everything we ever wanted in one moment. Sorry for the Eminem reference, but I just had to. But the world is a very special place in the fact that we only have one opportunity in one life. Why spend it being negative? As Cinema Wins put it, why focus on things that you hate, but instead of focus on things that you love? Just a little thought to leave you out on. So, yeah. As always, stay gold.